When a piece of media gets famous enough, there will always be people who want to express their love for a franchise in some way, shape, or form. This love for a franchise can take the form of fan-made films, songs, or even fanfic. Sometimes very graphic fanfiction. But one of my favorite forms of fan expression is the fan game. And there is one franchise in particular that has some of the most talented fan games I've ever seen in a community. This game, I'm sure you already know from reading the title, is of course Five Nights at Freddy's. Hello guys, ghouls and gals, and I am your host Nick Nightmare, and welcome to episode 1 of this new series. Today we will be going over 5 different FNAF fan games that I've found, ranking them on a tier list from best to worst. Now, as always, these are of course my opinions, and unless stated otherwise, I do not outright hate any of these entries. All of them are amazing and talented shows of passion for one of my favorite horror franchises, and should be seen as such. All of the developers in this video are very talented, and while I may have issues with some of the mechanics in this game, this doesn't mean that the game itself is bad. Maybe just not for me. That being said, let's get into it. But first, a little bit of background as to why these games are so important. Some of you may remember that in my video a couple months back, I went over a couple of fan games announced in the official Scott Cawthon Twitter account for FNAF's 10th anniversary. Scott is an interesting case when it comes to his game and his community. Getting so involved with supporting the community, he began a program known as the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. This initiative's goal is to establish some creators' fan games in the Fazbear canon. Yes, my dear listener, that means that Five Nights at Candy's and Pop Goes are both official in the FNAF canon. The lore video is gonna go crazy, I promise. Because of Scott establishing these games in the FNAF canon, as well as based on my own love for these FNAF fan games, I got to thinking, how do most of these games stand out from each other, and where would they stand on my own personal ranking system? Now, while I have used a number system in the past in order to keep track of games I've rated, I think it'll just be easier to sort these games on your standard tier list, with S being best of the best and F being the worst. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's start with our first 2 games, which became a bit of a classic in the fan game world. This is the Treasure Island series. Let's start with our first game in the series, Five Nights at Treasure Island, or renamed to Treasure Island. This was one of the first fan games ever made for FNAF, and while the original version had a couple of issues that held it back, the developer would go on to polish the game, giving it a new and unique identity. So, let's start with the story. You are an intern named Jake Smith, being paid to watch over the abandoned Treasure Island for an organization known as the Supernatural Studies Association. They've been hired by Disney to investigate the island, and while the rest of the organization is still getting equipment ready to investigate the strange goings-on, you have been hired to keep an eye on things. Mentions of these strange things roaming the islands have been popping up. Not exactly costumes, but no one knows what they are. During your time here, another member of your association who had never made it off the island calls for help, telling you to meet him on floor 2 of the Pirate Caverns, despite Lisa's warnings. When you make it there, the room he claims to be holed up in is empty, as it seems Henry has been turned into one of the creatures roaming the island. Despite this, he calls you again on night 6, telling you he found the vault and giving you the code to the locked door on floor 3. By going there, Mother locks you in the vault, trapping you there while the culminations of all the tunes, Hourglass, kills the remaining members of your crew. So, now that we've gotten through the story, how's the gameplay? Well, it's actually a pretty faithful recreation of the first FNAF game, with of course a couple of changes. Your main means of defending yourself against the tunes is going to be the cameras. By turning them off when they wander into your office, Photonegative Mickey, Impurity, and Oswald, and the Disembodied will all be lured out of your office. While the first 3 just kill you if you take too long to get rid of them, the other makes loud noises and obscures your vision, as well as making the other tunes more aggressive. Acephalus, also known as the Headless, as well as the Undying, can be warded off by simply holding Control to stand still. And finally, the face will appear in front of the desk, prompting the player to shut off the lights in order to ward him away. There's also the Pirate Coves. Floor 1 is where the face resides. The player must use a flashlight to look for him in the dark rooms, flashing him with a camera in order to keep him at bay. After collecting the key from the first floor, the player can make their way down to the second floor in order to look for Henry. And unfortunately, you find him, but not quite as he was before. The Undying is heavily suggested to be the remains of Henry. When he shows up in the halls, once again you are forced to hold control in order to stay still, causing him to lose you. Finally, on your 6th night, you are faced with one final showdown with Hourglass, who has quite possibly the most interesting mechanic I've ever seen for a FNAF game. Hourglass is, as mentioned, a culmination of all the tunes. During the 6th night, you are forced to search the cameras for him in order to pinpoint what room he has started his route in. Depending on where Hourglass starts his path, the player must stand still, shut off a camera, or shut off the lights. Now, I said this was one of the most interesting mechanics I've seen in a fan game, and while this is true on paper, in practice it just doesn't work the best in the game. Players are not only not given enough power to search for the cameras for Hourglass, but Hourglass also rapidly becomes more and more aggressive, making him difficult to locate before leaving his starting area. In reality, you want to minimize the amount of time you're on the camera. This can be done by checking 3 cameras, the roof and either Oswald and Mickey's rooms or the Acephalus and Undying rooms. After mimicking one of these tunes, they will automatically switch to any of the other ones, meaning in reality the only time you need to check any other camera besides the roof is after he appears on the roof. And this is not only the suggested strategy, but also the only viable one, as any other strategy will lead to him arriving in your office before you get necessary information needed, or running out of power before the night ends. It's slightly disappointing, but overall the game itself has a lot of talent behind it, and is extremely important to the history of FNAF fan games. Overall, I'd put Five Nights at Treasure Island in A tier. Despite some aspects of the mechanics holding it back, it is still a very solid fan game that not only lets you play the polished version of it, but also pays homage to its roots through a classic mode. Next, we move to Oblitus Casa, or The Forgotten House. This game is a direct sequel to the Treasure Island game. The story follows Jake once again after the events of Treasure Island. Jake is somehow able to escape the vault, escaping the pirate caverns and making his way to the surface of the island. However, with his only support from his team being gone, he is stuck here, being forced to hide away in an old, rundown cabin. He finds a strange notepad that informs him of the threats at hand, while also opening the door to another strange enemy. During this first night, Mother will always attack the player, revealing to Jake that he is being saved by some strange force. But just barely. After dying, Jake is placed in an office known as Post-Mortem. In this office, he must locate the 3 Mickey heads hidden throughout the cameras, while fending off the shaded tunes. Doing this, you are brought back to the office at the time of death, giving you the best opportunity to best the tunes and make it to daylight. However, daylight brings a whole new threat. As the sun pierces through the window of your office, Jake finds himself in the tunnel system beneath the office, being hunted by the same beast that killed his partners. Hourglass roams the tunnels of the islands, seemingly falling apart due to its own instability. Jake is forced to run through the tunnel system, avoiding Hourglass and finding the exit. This happens every night until after night 4. This time, Jake doesn't want to escape the tunnels. He wants to hunt down Hourglass before he gets away again. He finds Hourglass hiding in a locker beneath the island, setting it alight and angering Mother. This causes Mother to confront him on the final night, replacing every other tune except for the face. After fending off Mother, Jake sets the cabin on fire, taking Mother with it and defeating the tunes until he is found by a rescue team looking for the rest of the crew. This brings us to where we are found at the start of the game, being interviewed by your doctor, Jared Rowley, Jake being the primary suspect in the disappearance of his colleagues. Now, how is the game itself? Well, let's start with the office, as well as how the characters interact. Gone are the photonegative Mickey and Acephalus, being replaced with the likes of Dippy and Willy. These toons will attempt to make their way into your room, one through the window and the other one through one of the two doors. Both of them can be lured away by the music box by playing it in a camera nearby them. Daisy and Photo Negative Mini also replace their shade counterparts, both being warded away by a camera flash, with Mini attempting to get into your office and Daisy attempting to shut down your cameras. The face has returned once again, appearing in your attic and being warded away by the lighter, with Pete also appearing in your attic, only attacking if you shine the lighter in his face. Finally, Belial slowly begins appearing on your notepad as a drawing, forcing the player to erase her, or else she will appear in your office, shutting off your access to the attic and attracting other toons towards the office quicker. In the tunnel, the player must listen to a bell sound in order to find the exit, which only sounds when the player's lighter is off. While roaming the tunnels, Hourglass hunts for the player. At times, the lighter will be enough to ward him away, but when it only causes him to pause, the player must take this time to run through the tunnels in order to create distance between themselves and the beast. Finally, on the final night, Mother appears once again in the form of Mick. This creature reacts differently depending on its eyes, able to be lured away with the music or pushed back by the camera flash. However, sometimes Mick will sneak into your attic, attempting to lure you in to kill you. If the player goes into the attic at all while Mick is inside, it will kill you. However, the face is still in the attic, needing the player to deal with them whenever he shows up. Mother also shows up in the same way that Daisy and Belial does. At 3 a.m., Mick appears larger with longer limbs and a more distorted figure. Overall, on my tier list, the game would rank an A just below Treasure Island. While it is still a good game, I think the tunnel section, while tense and terrifying, is brought down by how lost the player can feel at times, as well as the fact that if you are not looking at Hourglass when he appears in a tunnel, it can be hard to tell whether he's even there, leading to Jake's early demise. Still though, a very solid game series and a good one to start this ranking series off on. Next up, we have a game that attempted to recreate the tycoon aspect of Pizzeria Tycoon. The player can increase the revenue brought in by their restaurant by upgrading items, bringing in customers, and hiring new employees to keep things moving quick. This game is unfortunately not finished, however, and it's very clear that it's not finished. How can one tell? Well, first of all, a player can continually upgrade the size of their pizzeria with no cost to them. Second of all, the experience system seems rather flawed, with none being able to be earned through anything other than buying items, it would seem. Finally, item upgrades are non-existent. I attempted to upgrade the dining table multiple times, but it just didn't work. Could this just be I'm a bit stupid? Maybe. But overall, the game style, while being the classic 8-bit style, just isn't as satisfying as seeing your pizzeria in the minimalistic 3D style. And overall, this game just doesn't compete with the others when it comes to the enjoyment derived from it. Overall, I put the game at a low C tier for now. It has the makings to be something really fun, but it just hasn't been finished, and there's no telling if it ever will be. Next up is kind of a more goofy entry into the Fazverse. This is a bite at Freddy's. You're hired to help the manager of Freddy Fazbear's Grill test out their new state-of-the-art food delivery system. This game is relatively short, only consisting of 3 different courses, plus one final course acting as the game's version of different nights. During these courses, the manager will be grilling food in the kitchen and sending it out to the different rooms around the restaurant in order to test out a new food delivery system. Your job is to make sure the food gets there, confirming its arrival by going to the camera where the food has arrived and pressing the confirm order button on the bottom of the left screen. This will tell the manager that everything is running smoothly and to continue on to the next test. He's very inefficient. He will not start until you press this button. However, while he is busy testing these systems, the animatronics do roam the restaurant, attempting to use those very same chutes in order to access your room. While each animatronic can attempt to use the delivery chutes in order to access your room, they also have secondary ways of getting inside. Talk show Bonnie and Chica will always wander to your door. Bonnie peers inside, attacking the player if they don't shut the lights off in time, and Chica hides beneath your desk, but can be warded away by picking up the toy pistol activating her showdown mode. A good old-fashioned standoff. By facing her down in this dramatic duel, you win a free soda. Oh, and survive, I guess. Freddy has access to a specific chute in the restaurant at all times, even if you close it. If he makes it to this chute, he will appear in the AC vents. By turning on the vent fan, the player can ward him away. And for all of you who have had that power fantasy about taking the animatronics' heads off, you can. Well, Freddy's at least. By waiting until Freddy is in the second phase of the AC vent, you can take off his head, making it appear in your room. This does, however, make him more aggressive and should only be used as a last resort. Talk show Foxy appears in his lab, making his way over to the spare parts room in order to take a bite out of them. However, by refreshing your cameras as he's biting into them, this will give him a good shock and send him scurrying away. However, after being shocked multiple times, Foxy seems to have enough, sneaking into the kitchen behind the manager in an attempt to rush down the access tunnel in your room. Finally, Threadbare can go through any of the vents, including the AC vent, and can even show up in the spare parts room, interfering with your cameras, as well as jamming the delivery chutes. However, by refreshing your cameras or stopping the chute and starting it again, the player can fend him off. Overall, the game isn't too hard and has some very fun and engaging mechanics. Apparently, this is the sequel to a different FNAF fan game, but I have yet to play it and only learned about it during the research for this video. Overall, I'd say this game earned its place in S tier. Despite how short it is genuinely one of my favorite fan games to play so far in this list. That is, until we get to the next game we have on the list. One of my favorite fan games ever created, not only becoming a staple in the fan game genre, but earning its place in the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. The joy of creation is a different kind of fan game. This game doesn't take place in the Fazbear universe or any spin-off of the Fazbear universe. This game takes place in a spin-off of Scott Cawthon's life. Following Scott's success with the FNAF series, he sees the rise and steady fall of what was his most famous creation. However, when arriving home one day to find a strange man in his home, things begin to take a turn for the worse. Seeing how tired and hungry the man looks, they let him stay in one of their guest rooms for the night. Strange sounds begin echoing through the halls, and the man that they let into their home begins running room to room, spreading warnings to the family of the danger he's brought with him. The most amazing aspect of this game is the fact that each of its levels are completely unique. Each night, quote-unquote, is actually a different memory taking place somewhere different within Scott's home. Your first memory is in the bedroom of Scott's son, Nicky. Wait a minute. I'll be right back, guys. Okay, slightly disappointing Google search out of the way. Your challenge in the bedroom begins with Michael coming to your room to tell you about the monsters coming to try and get you. These are the ignited animatronics you'll be seeing throughout the night. Freddy will look into your window, sneaking in if you don't shut the curtains quick enough. Bonnie will knock 3 times on your door, bashing inside on the 3rd knock. When he does, you want to turn off your lamp and sit in the crib. That will ward him away. When Chica peers into your room, turn off the light but try not to sit, otherwise she will attack, briefly stunning you. And Foxy crawls out from under the bed, requiring Nick to lay down and close his eyes, as Foxy can only see his eyes. However, one more factor complicates the entire night. The ignited animatronics are quite gruesome looking, and looking at them directly or even just sitting in the dark will slowly start to drive Nicky mad. That's right, this small child who still sleeps in a crib can actually lose his mind if you stare too intently at the animatronics around you. In order to avoid this, or rather slow the process for long enough, Nicky must look into the lamp next to his bed. This will slow the progression of your insanity and give you enough time to make it through the night. Next, we cut to Scott and his wife sitting in the living room. Scott is worried about his son, worried that maybe he shouldn't have let Michael stay. He leaves to check on Nicky before Michael shows up once again, warning Scott's wife about the oncoming threat. The television, which has previously cut to static, is now replaced by cameras from the point of view of two animatronics, Foxy and Freddy. They both slowly approach the doors on either side and will kill you if they see you. However, by holding the pause button at the top of one of their cameras, you can stop their movement, knocking them off rhythm and giving you time to hide behind their doors. They're not very smart. Ignited Bonnie appears in the hall behind the couch, but by checking the keyhole and keeping track of him, you can hide from him in the same way as the other two. And Chica is only a threat if you stay on the cameras for too long, and even then will only stun you and turn off your cameras briefly. This section is a tad easier to me than the first, but still a very fun section. Next, we cut to Scott on his way to check on Nikki. He begins hearing noises and sees a figure in the hall. Freddy. Freddy chases Scott down and corners him in his own office, trapping him in yet another game. Recordings from Scott reveal that time has been moving strangely since he's been trapped here, with the clock on the wall only moving when he confronts Freddy. These recordings reveal that Scott has been trapped in some kind of purgatory, forced to repeat the same night over and over again unless he confronts Freddy head-on, as Freddy's the only animatronic unable to attack him. Meanwhile, Foxy and Chica are also trying to get into his room, Foxy only hiding away after being spotted by the cameras, and Chica being drawn into your room by the cries of her cupcakes. Bonnie also sits outside your office, destroying your camera if you look him in the eyes. This is also the section we played before in the demo for this game's remake. After the events in the office, Scott finds a note from his wife and kids, telling him they're hiding in the panic room in the basement. Desperate to protect his family, Scott rushes off to the basement in order to find them, but instead finds himself locked inside, alone. Or so it seems. After waking up in the panic room, Scott exits back into the basement to see something strange. His basement now has multiple televisions, being used as a vessel for some unknown being to speak to him. The being gives him the instructions he needs to escape, and after going to check on the door, seeing that it is now blocked off by a cage, the player must wander back to the panic room, avoiding the endo in the middle of the room. For the sake of simplicity, there will be 3 endos we face playing this game that we'll go over real quick. There's Endo Mouth, Endo Blue, and Endo Angel. Endo Mouth is the first encountered and will only attack the player if they get too close to it, remaining stationary otherwise. After going back in and out of the panic room, the player is told to return the animatronics to the fire. In order to do this, Scott must locate their items around the basement and place them into the furnace. However, Mouth is guarding these items, reacting differently based on the item used. Foxy's hook can be found in the trash can in the camera room, which will spawn Mouth in front of the panic room. However, it will despawn if you either go up the stairs to the basement door or place the hook inside of the furnace. Freddy's hat is hidden behind the desk, which will prompt Mouth to guard the furnace, but once again you can despawn it by going up to the basement door and coming back down. There are 2 closets in the basement, with Mouth hiding in one and Bonnie's guitar in the other, and by finding the guitar, Mouth will no longer be in the other closet. Finally, what in my opinion is the only real frustrating part of this level is Chica's cupcake, which is hidden behind a poster with Chica on it. However, when approaching the poster, the player can hear Mouth growling behind it. This means you have to wait for the growling to stop before grabbing the cupcake, otherwise the hole will appear empty and Mouth will kill you. Now, if you take too long to find the items, Endo Blue will begin appearing in the player's vision. Static will appear around your vision and you will be forced to run back to the panic room, otherwise Blue will kill you. The next trial is a numbers trial. There are 2 keypads around the rooms, with the first no offering any real threat. The code can be found by looking at the posters, with the number of characters on the poster correlating to their place in the 4-digit code. However, after opening the gate, the player's vision will flash with the message "Don't look away," and Endo Angel will appear from beneath the curtain he was hiding under. The angels, as their name suggests, will only approach the player when they are not being looked at. This complicates locating the other code, which can only be found by counting the number of presents each character on the drawing has, which correlates to their place in the 4-digit code, as well as identifying the characters with their primary colors, which match the colors on the keypad. After opening the next gate and grabbing a key, Angel will disappear once again. By moving on to the next trial, instead of the normal office, you find yourself in a long hallway with a light at the end. Making your way down, Blue gives you visions once again, and you are given the instruction, don't look back. By looking back, Blue will immediately start running towards the player, but by not looking back and just holding forward, he still runs towards you, but gives you enough time to make it to your next trial. The strange voice tells you that your creations remain, before opening the 3 gates to your left, revealing 2 angels and 2 mouths. The player must make their way to the end of the room to press a button without dying to the angels or mouths. By making it to the end, the final gate to the exit opens, with yet another angel on the other side. The player must somehow maneuver around the 3 angels in order to make it to the exit. The gate to the door opens, only for ignited Golden Freddy to appear. The door to the basement disappears and you are forced to go back to the panic room one more time, revealing the basement has gone back to normal, aside from one thing. There is now a computer showing the development of Five Nights at Freddy's. Wandering upstairs, Scott passes out, waking up in our next memory. The attic is the final act of the game, with Scott tied to a chair with a radio in front of him. Michael's voice comes from the radio, telling Scott thank you for creating him, and letting him know in order for his creations to live on, Scott must die. There are 4 different threats in the attic. The first and most obvious is Creation, who starts in the basement. Creation will slowly make his way up to you, only being slowed down by flashing him with your lights. The next on the same cameras as Creation is Ignited Golden Freddy. In order to complete this night, you must flash 12 Golden Freddys. He will also appear behind you, attacking you if you don't turn back around in time. The next are the Endos on these secondary cameras. Endo Blue and Red do not appear in the cameras, but you can hear them running down the hall. If they are running down your hall, you must close their door. Mouth and Angel do, however, appear on the cameras, only attacking if the light on their camera goes out. By beating this night, you see the creation burn with the rest of the house, along with Scott, with Michael's final promise being that he will protect Scott's family. Something that looks like Scott appears to them outside, repeating everything is fine, slowly becoming more and more distorted. This game also has multiple challenge modes for its different memories, and I feel as if I don't even need to explain why this game is S tier. Every level is different and challenging, and the character designs are amazing, with the ignited animatronics truly giving off the feeling of a forgotten memory left to burn. This game earns its place at the top of S tier. 5 FNAF fan games. This video is only going over 5 of the talented fan games that this franchise has created. I will definitely do more of these. This was a lot of fun to write for, and it was a lot of fun seeing the passion behind these games. But unfortunately, my time is up. But if you like this video, please feel free to let me know, and if you have any ideas for other fan games you'd like to see, or just other games in general that you'd like to see me play, or review, or do lore videos on, please let me know. And as always, I hope to see you all in the archives again soon. Goodbye for now.